بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity to come together with our brothers and sisters here tonight in Kuwait City. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be giving a piece of advice tonight, inshallah ta'ala, a piece of advice from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. An advice that inshallah ta'ala, if we implement it in our life, it's going to make us successful in this life and in the next, inshallah ta'ala. Because this piece of advice that we're about to listen to from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and reflect upon, inshallah ta'ala, it's going to organize our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with others, inshallah ta'ala. And this is the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when he said, "Ittaqillah haythuma kunt." Fear Allah wherever you may be. وَاتْبِعْ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا وَخَالِقَ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And wipe away the bad deed with a good deed, and to have good manners in dealing with people. And the first part of the hadith is talking about the relationship, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Allah wherever you may be. And the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have you ever asked yourself why it's all throughout the Quran? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and fear Allah. وَالْمُتَّقُونَ, الْمُتَّقِينَ, and those who have the taqwa. Why is it all throughout the Quran? Because of the importance of reflecting on the issue of taqwa. Constantly reminding yourself of being from the muttaqeen, of establishing the taqwa in your life. What is the taqwa? If we want to define taqwa, some of the scholars of Islam, they said it's to put a barrier between yourself and between the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To put a barrier. If this action is going to lead you to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you put that barrier by leaving it. If this action you have to do it, then you do it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You put this barrier between yourself and between being punished and held to account by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah. The taqwa of Allah. And when we look at some of the definitions of some of the scholars that they mention about the taqwa, one of the beautiful definitions is the definition of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. When he was asked, what is the taqwa? And he said it, al-khawf min al-jaleel. To have the fear from al-jaleel subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal-amal bil-tanzeel, and to act upon that which was sent down, the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal-qana'atu bil-qaleel, and to be sufficed with something small, meaning not to be attached to this dunya, because when you're attached to this dunya, you drift away from focusing on the akhirah. And then wal-isti'dad li-yawm al-rahim, and to prepare yourself for the day you're going to go away, the journey to the hereafter, to prepare yourself for the hereafter. This is the reality of the true believer, how he needs to be in this dunya, establishing the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Muslims, so many things we don't do, we leave doing. Why? The fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wanting the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to a Muslim and relations, haram relations, having a girlfriend. Are you guys married or not? Most of you married? Alhamdulillah. You're not married? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a But even if you're married, why don't you have something on the side? It's common in a lot of countries, somebody's married but he has something on the side. Every now and then. Some haram on the side. Then what stops you from having something on the side? Don't worry, your wives can't see you, by the way. They're blocked off. So she's not going to know what you answering the question. Don't worry. Don't be scared. What stops you? Is it the love of your wife? Or the fear of your wife? Which is it? Huh? Most likely it's the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because as a man or as a human being, you want to do certain things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did he say about the human? زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ. That it's been beautified to the human being what? The love of the desires, the lust and desires. What stops us though is the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reality of tomorrow, Yawm al-Qiyamah, when I stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to be held accountable. And that's why the next part of the hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, وَأَتْبِعَ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. And follow up the bad deed with a good deed, it'll wipe it away. It'll cleanse it away. And this is from the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we fall into sins, we have the opportunity to wipe it away, to clean it away, to have a clean slate. And what happens when you return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you make tawbah? What happens? That bad deed just doesn't go away, it gets turned into what? And a good deed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turns the bad deeds into good deeds. Yubaddilu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He changes the bad deeds to hasanat, to good deeds. There's an opportunity. And this is the relationship between you and yourself. Because what happens when you have the bad deeds? How does it affect you? How does it affect your iman? The true believer, reflect on the salat. When the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned the du'as of istiftah. There's different du'as he used to make alayhi salatu wasalam. From the du'as he would make, at the end of it, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to wash the sins away, بالماء والثلج والبرد. To wash away with water and ice and snow. Some of the scholars mention, why is this? Why were these three mentioned? These three cold things, these three soothing things. Because what happens, the true believer, when he falls into sin, it burns inside. He feels inside, I shouldn't have done this. I wish I hadn't done this. He feels it inside. So he wants to wash it away by doing the good deeds. So from this dua, you remind yourself the importance of washing away the sins because of the effect it has upon you. And this is the goal of the human being, to even be happy in this life. Islam doesn't come to make you happy in the hereafter only, even in this life. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ لَفِي جَحِيمٍ. That verily the doers of good, they are in na'im, in pleasure. A pleasure in this life and in the next, inshallah ta'ala. وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ لَفِي جَحِيمٍ. That verily the doers of evil, they're in jahim, in a hell. A living hell in this dunya and a hell in the hereafter. And that's why you look time and time again, those who have the dunya. So many of the Hollywood actors and actresses and the singers, what ends up happening at the end of their life? They kill themselves. They overdose on drugs. Why? Because they're living in a living hell. SubhanAllah, in several of my lectures, and several of my TV shows, I talked about the story of Robin Williams. Before he died, before he killed himself, because I saw an interview. I saw an interview with this successful Hollywood actor who reached the top of his game, of his profession. You can't get any better than what he was in his profession. And we're talking about, is it halal, haram, tawbah? What he did, he was good at, no doubt about that. I saw an interview, and he was talking about his addiction to alcohol and how he was trying to rehabilitate. He was going through trouble with alcohol. They asked him, why? You're so successful. Why are you abusing alcohol? He said, because I'm living in a living hell. I'm living in a living hell, he said. And subhanAllah, I remember the verse immediately. إِنَّ الْأَبْرَارَ لَفِي نَعِيمٍ وَإِنَّ الْفُجَّارَ لَفِي جَحِيمٍ. That the doers of good, they're going to be in pleasure, while the doers of evil, they're going to be in this hell, living hell in the dunya. And what happened? Several years later, the severe depression ended up making him take his own life. Because of how he felt inside. So you wipe away the bad deeds with the good deeds. To prepare yourself to be happy in this life and then to be successful Yawm al-Qiyamah. Pay attention to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us in Surah Al-Hashr in the name of Iman by saying, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. And pay attention, because you know it's very important when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh you who believe. Pay attention. Pay attention to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about to say to you. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Ittaqullah. Fear Allah. وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And let every soul look at that which it put forth for tomorrow. Every soul, the true believer, the clever one, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, is the one who holds himself to account before death comes. Look at that, what you're putting forth for tomorrow. How many of us know exactly how much money we have in our accounts? Or pretty close. In your bank account, you know, I have this much dinars, I have this much this. If you send it back to your country, you know, in your account in your country, you have this many rupees or whatever it is, where your country is from. You know exactly how much money you have. You pay attention to the account of the dunya. What about the account of the hereafter? Because Yawm al-Qiyamah, we're going to come, we're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرٍ يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. Whoever does an atom's weight, pay attention, atom's weight of good or evil, he's going to see it on that day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to reflect. Ittaqullah, fear Allah, put that barrier between you and the punishment of Allah. And let every soul look at that which you put forth for tomorrow. And then what does Allah say? He comes back again subhanahu wa ta'ala in the same verse. Wattaqullah. And fear Allah. Because fearing Allah is the way to make you successful. Fearing Allah is the way to make you put that barrier between yourself and the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To help yourself, save yourself from the hellfire. With the taqwa. And then pay attention to the end of the verse. Inna Allah khabirun bima ta'malun. That verily Allah is well acquainted with that what you do. To remind you that Allah knows everything you do. He knows everything you say. So you're not going to pull one over on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to be held accountable. So make the best of this opportunity that you have in the life to wipe away all of the bad deeds with good deeds. And then he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, وَخَالِقَ النَّاسِ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And have good manners in dealing with people. What is the status of good manners in Islam? Sometimes we don't pay attention to this. Sometimes some of the people with the worst manners are what? The Muslims. I was with some brothers recently in Ireland, from some Arab countries. In Ireland, mashallah, you have the old school streets built by the British back in the day. Those are still the streets. So some of the streets, it can only fit one car. Only one car. So what happens? The person on the other side stops, and they do the lights, and they tell you come, and you go through, and they say to you this, and you say to them this, and it's going through. And I said to some of the Arab brothers, I said, imagine in an Arab country, or a Muslim country, I said, if we had a street like that, how many people will get killed? Will get beaten down, will be cursed at? If you were to come in my street, I have more right than you. What would happen? Seriously, we know that. There'd be some big problems in our countries. But if we look at how the early Muslims were, the same thing. They had that akhlaq, they had those manners. Subhanallah. What is the status of akhlaq, of manners in Islam? The Prophet ﷺ told us, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتِمِّمْ مَكَارِمِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. That verily I was sent to perfect good manners. So one of the main reasons the Prophet ﷺ was sent was to perfect good manners. So the status of good manners in Islam. Think about that next time you have bad akhlaq. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَحْسِنُكُمْ, the best of you, أَحْسِنُكُمْ خُلُقًا, the best of you in his manners. He's the best of you. The Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to have good manners, saying that nothing will enter in the Jannah, nothing will enter people more into Jannah than taqwa Allah wa husnul khuluq, than the fear of Allah and good manners. The Prophet ﷺ then said, verily you can reach the level of a sa'im and al-qa'im, the one who is fasting during the day and praying during the night with your good manners. All of these ajr after ajr, reward after reward for having good manners. And when the Muslims had good manners and acted upon the teachings of Islam, that is one of the best ways to give da'wah. The largest Muslim population in the world today, where is it? Indonesia. How do they accept Islam? Through the sword, right? Allahu Akbar. Huh? That's what they say. Islam spread through the sword. Did any Muslim army go to Indonesia to spread Islam? No. They accepted Islam through the treatment of the Muslim businessmen who used to go there. They used to go there to trade and sell things. And they knew them before Islam. The same Arab guys used to come trade and cheat them before Islam. All of a sudden now they're being honest and telling, no, this is not good material. There's something wrong with this material. If you want to buy it, you know there's something wrong with it. Like, what's wrong with you? What happened? You used to lie to us all the time. What happened to you? They said, no, we're Muslims now. Things have changed. We have to be honest now as Muslims. The Prophet said, "Man ghashana falaysa minna." Whoever cheats us is not from us. We're going to be held accountable Yawm al-Qiyamah for our deeds. I said, MashaAllah, what is this? All of them accepted Islam through the treatment of the people, the good manners. So we need to go home tonight, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, and reflect on these 3 pieces of advice and see where are we. It's not an aid, it's not something to look down upon if you have a weakness in some area. What's an aid, what's looked down upon is that you continue. We always have to try to improve ourselves in all aspects of life, in the deen and in the dunya. If you're working in your field, you want to stay in the same place the whole time, or do you want to move up? Let's be honest, in the dunya wise. If your boss came to you now and said, would you like a raise? Would you like a promotion? Would any of you say no? Say no. I want to stay just like I am. Don't want any more money. Don't want a better position, a better future. I don't want it. Leave me like I am. Also in the deen, we want to improve ourselves in the deen as well. We want to increase. So let's go home tonight and ask ourselves, how is our taqwa? What is the level of our taqwa? Would you give yourself on a 1 to 10, a 5, a 4, a 3, an 8? What are your weak areas in your taqwa? What's making your taqwa weak? Let's focus on making these better. What are the areas that you have strong taqwa? And then also you focus on holding firm and improving that as well. So it makes you stronger in your taqwa in general. And then you look at what are the good deeds I can do to wipe away the bad deeds. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that if a person commits a sin and he gets up and he makes the tahara and then he prays 2 rakats and asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him, Allah will forgive him. Wiping away the good deeds. And then it gets turned into inshallah. The bad deeds get turned into good deeds. So let's focus on trying to wipe away all the bad deeds as much as we can, to do good deeds, to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then focus on how to improve our akhlaq, how to improve our manners. Because some people were born with good customs. It's true or not. You go to certain countries, mashallah, they have beautiful akhlaq in some aspects. Other aspects they don't. You go to another country and you find, mashallah, in this aspect they're good in their manners. Another aspect they're not. So we always want to improve our manners. Remember the status of manners in Islam. Remember the ajr, the reward of manners in Islam. Next time you deal with somebody, remember the Prophet ﷺ used to always smile at people when he dealt with them. He would shake their hand, look at them in the eyes. Good manners. When you deal with people, have respect for the person when you deal with them, like the Prophet ﷺ did. If we follow his footsteps, ﷺ, it's going to improve us in the deen and in the dunya. Because he's the perfect role model, ﷺ. In Allah knows best, Allahu a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina Muhammad. There's some questions, inshallah ta'ala.
Brothers, if you have questions, please go ahead and ask.
When you said...
When you look at...
You can repeat the question.
Yes. The brother's asking, when I said in one area you have strong taqwa, in one area you have weak. Everybody has his weakness. Okay? And another person might be strong in that area. So let's say, for example, when it comes to lowering the gaze, you'll find that one brother, as soon as he sees the woman, astaghfirullah, he looks down. He's strong in that, mashallah. The other brother, it's like super glue for him. He can't turn away, you know? It's really difficult. And then he turns back the second time, the third time, the fourth time, and then astaghfirullah, and then he remembers. Because what happens sometimes, shaitan, he beautifies. So he looks back, and he's like, and he keeps looking. And then when he gets closer and closer, and he sees the face, he says, astaghfirullah. Then he remembers. But from past, so that happens. So you find he's weak, another one's strong. You'll find another brother, he can never miss the 5 daily prayers in the masjid. Never can miss it. He's very strong in that. Another brother, he has trouble. You know, Dhuhr, that he's at work, okay, that's easy. Salatul Fajr, it's like, when's the last time you prayed Fajr? It's for Ramadan, right? Because you're awake, you're eating anyways. You're eating for the dunya. So when you eat, you're ready to pray Fajr. But that's Fajr, I haven't been praying Fajr in years, you know, that's not Ramadan. He's weak in that. So these are the areas you need to reflect on. So if you have something you're strong on, when you reflect on the areas of strength, it keeps you strong. It doesn't mean you leave the areas of strength. That's what I want to point out. If you have something you're strong on, that's a ni'mah, it's a blessing. So you focus on keeping that strong and even try to make it stronger if you can. Let's say if when it comes to lowering the gaze, you're an 8 out of a 10. Make it a 9, make it a 10. If you're with your 5 daily prayers, most of the time you're good, except Fajr, for example. That's good, alhamdulillah, that you have the other ones, but now you're going to put Fajr into it. See what I'm saying? And then you focus on the weak areas. Everybody has a different weakness. You'll find somebody that when it comes to looking at movies, he shouldn't be looking at it. It's a big fitna for him. Another brother, you can put the TV on in front of him, he'll open up the Quran and say, I'm not going to watch that. So people have different strengths and different weaknesses, so you need to know yourself. And we have this statement in Arabic when it comes to taking care of yourself physically. But even when it comes to iman-wise, it's the same thing. They say, Al-Mar'u tabibu nafsihi. The person is his own doctor. You know that this type of food or not exercising that harms you. Also, when it comes to your soul, you know what's being good for your soul and what's bad for it. And everybody knows himself. And that's what I meant by that question.
Any other questions, please?
Also, if the sisters have any questions, they can throw it over the thing, maybe we can write it.
Sisters, you may write questions on the piece of paper.
Or if your husband's here, you can WhatsApp him or text him.
Okay, that's
We're becoming more.
okay.
Any other questions? It's usually the first question is the difficult one.
Do you think you know Sheikh enough? Do you think you know him enough?
Never heard of him before.
Never heard of him. So Sheikh Abdur Raheem, I ask on their behalf. Give them a brief introduction. How you came to Islam? It's a typical question they ask every revert. How you came to Islam? A little bit of your life experience, because mashallah, through your CV, you've been a traveled person. I mean, I was impressed by it. To be honest with you, I'd glad to have you here, by the way.
I'm not going to tell you the whole story.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some homework. Because I'm a teacher as well, alhamdulillah. But when it comes to teaching, I retired before 40. It was my goal to retire from teaching before 40. Because we learn as teachers that most teachers die right after retirement. Because of the stress they go through the whole time. As soon as they're 60, after that they retire 1-2 years, and then they die. So I said, let me retire early, inshallah, before 40, and I did, alhamdulillah.
Scary.
But alhamdulillah, it still stays in the system. So I'm going to give you guys homework, inshallah, which is to go to YouTube and to type in my name, and you'll find the complete story about how I became Muslim. I think it's the first thing you'll see. It was actually done on Sharqa TV, about how I became Muslim. But in general, I'll give you something brief, which is, obviously you know my name is Abdur, Raheem McCarthy. I became Muslim in 1994 at the age of 18. And then 6 months after accepting Islam, I traveled to Sudan, later to Saudi Arabia. I even visited Kuwait here during that time, and other UAE and other Islamic countries. And I started to learn the Arabic language and tajweed and what have you. And then I got accepted to the Islamic University of Medina. And I stayed in Medina for 10 years, studying in the university and outside of the university with the scholars. And I graduated there from 2006. And ever since 2006, I've been working in the field of education, teaching Islamic studies in English and Arabic, and also traveling around the world, lecturing, giving TV shows on Peace TV, Huda TV, and a lot of other TV channels, Sharqa TV, Qatar TV, and what have you. And I'm currently here, part of it was 7 countries, but now one of them was canceled. I'm on a tour, it's going to take about 5 weeks to finish, to 6 different countries. So this is the 3rd country, Kuwait. I was in Qatar and then Sudan, and now Kuwait, and then I'll be going inshallah to Sri Lanka, and then to Bahrain, and then to the UK, and then back to Ireland inshallah after that, alhamdulillah. So that's brief about me, alhamdulillah.
You have brothers from Sri Lanka.
Okay, mashallah. So it'll be the first time I'll visit
I don't want to have to arrange a reception for him.
I want a reception like at the airport today. The guy came back from that. They had a big reception in the airport. This guy came back from, he was having some treatment on the side, so they had a big party in the airport. I've never seen that before. So. They had swords and everything, and dancing around. Any other questions, everyone?
He came all the way from Ireland. Come on.
Could you give us some tips on dawah?
Tips on that.
When it comes to, was asking about tips on da'wah, the most important thing when it comes to da'wah is for the person you're giving da'wah to see the effect of Islam on you. How many times we give da'wah and people see the beauty of Islam, the original Islam? What turns them away is the Muslims. You come, you show them the beauty of this, and they look at the Muslims and say, Allah Akbar. If this looks very nice in the book, and I respect Islam, but if it was really true, it was really beneficial, it would have benefited you and your people first. So look at our situation is one of the biggest things that turn people away from Islam. That's what we have to realize. And when you work with non-Muslims, you deal with non-Muslims, you have to realize you're representing Islam. Because they're not going to come and they're going to say the Sri Lankans or the Indians or the Pakistanis or whatever nationality you're from or the Kuwaitis. They're going to say the Muslims. Pay attention to that. The Muslims are like this. I know the Muslims. I dealt with Muhammad and Abdullah and Ahmed. I work with them, yeah. And this is how they work. When they see that you're somebody who's honest, or somebody who's practicing your deen, somebody who's committed to your deen, they see the effects of Islam on you. That's the key thing. Is that the effects of Islam is seen upon you. Then after that is you learn how to give da'wah. A lot of times we make the mistakes, and I was just, those of you with me on Twitter and Facebook, you might have saw the picture I put up before I came. I was in Doha, I had a meeting with our brother, Raheem. And we're talking about different things in da'wah. And one of the biggest things that we have, I said, I told them that mashallah, we have some brothers who want to send us a lot of books in Ireland. And I told them that most of the books you're going to send us don't benefit us, they'll harm us. Because the translation is not good, the topic's not good, and we don't need them. You know, we appreciate it. If you want to do something, print us some books that are beneficial. So you need to know how to give da'wah. And one of the beneficial ways now, perhaps you guys have studied the go-rap method of giving da'wah. That's a very important thing, is know how to give da'wah. And a lot of times now people want to come with conflict and talk about conflict and the modern affairs and this and that. So no, first of all, understand what Islam is. You go back to the basics with them and give it down. That's important because if you come now and you talk about, let's say ISIS, these problems going around the world, talk to us about this. Okay, let's talk about this and then once you finish dancing, 4 wives. And then you talk about if the guy's like, okay, it's okay with me, the women don't like it, huh? And so you know, then we're going to talk about all the other different problems. You know, this in Islam, that in Islam, and so okay, understand first what Islam is, and then we'll talk about these topics. The hijab. How can a woman why does she have to wear hijab? Okay? Understand what Islam is, and then you understand why she submits to the Creator and why she wears the hijab. But if you talk about hijab sometimes for 4 or 5 hours with a woman, she's not going to be convinced. If she understands why the woman submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it says what Islam is, then inshallah ta'ala, she will understand. So those are the key things I think when it comes to, and obviously you need da'wah training, you need several hours to go into more detail, but the key thing is that you practice Islam within yourself first and foremost, and then that you know how to give da'wah. You know, what are the basics of Islam? And it's always important in giving da'wah that we focus on the basics. Sometimes we want to focus on science and the Quran. That's a beneficial tool, but it's not the basics of giving da'wah. We use that in a later stage in giving da'wah. And look how the Prophet gave the da'wah to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submitting to the revelation. And then after that, then you can bring the other scientific facts to support your argument, what have you. And Allah knows best.
So Sheikh Abdur came, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, bring on further. You're the audience, please.
Just wanted to ask a particular situation. For example, if you come really close to getting shot from a person, right? And they already believe everything you're about to say. They just give you excuses. They're like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the faith in my heart. I'm not feeling Iman. I'm not feeling any spirituality right now. I can't say it. I don't want to lie to myself. And so then you try to give them that sense of urgency, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Death's not going to wait for you. You better say it. Whether you feel it or not.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, Allah knows my heart. Oh no, Allah's forgiving. I should have lied to myself. You just keep going around the bush pretty much. Just trying to debate it. You know what I mean?
The brother's asking, and this happens a lot. Because when a person wants to accept Islam, is asking, they say they want to accept Islam. They say, for example, I'm not feeling it right now. When I feel it, I get that feeling, I get the sign from Allah, then I'm going to do it, right? That's what they say. So, and who is there with him at this time? Shaitan. He's giving all kinds of excuses. And if you answer that excuse, he's going to bring the next excuse. So what you have to realize is once you understand, and you have to try to convince the person. Because see, you're there, you believe. There's nothing holding you back. So, waiting for a sign, or waiting for, you're going to feel it. Essentially, you'll feel it after you say the shahada. Don't worry about that. You're going to feel it, inshallah. So you have to try to convince them to realize that they're being tricked by shaitan to take that next step. There's nothing holding you back. And that's what you asked them in the beginning. What don't you like about Islam? Is there anything you say, well, I'm good to go. I'm good to go with Islam. I love Islam, but I don't feel it's the time. Okay? And then you have to say you never know where you're going to go, you can die. But the important thing is to make them realize, to convince them that there's nothing holding them back. And there's so many situations, the one who's trying to hold you back is the shaitan, and you can just try to convince them. At the end of the day, subhanAllah, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. You have to realize at the end you try your best to convince them and to use good arguments. There's nothing holding you back. And when you're convinced, so you're convinced Islam is the original truth, you're convinced, don't let anything hold you back. Take that step. And then you can tell them, just do it. Do it now. And then if you change your mind on this, most likely the person takes the shahada, they're going to stay inshallah. They'll become better in the deen inshallah. You try to get them to take that step and to not let shaitan trick them. But like I said, at the end, you cannot guide who you please. Only Allah guides who He pleases. So people come with different excuses. One time I was giving da'wah, I received a phone call from a sister from Sweden. She said, I met a sister in the mosque in Dubai. And she said, I want to ask you some questions about Islam. She talked to me for on the phone for about 45 minutes. I walked in the house, I'm talking on the phone with this woman. My wife is like, what's going on here? I'm there, we're talking about Islam. So about 45 minutes we're talking on the phone. And I said, I have a lecture later on tonight. It was Thursday night, something like this. I said, I have a lecture in the center there in Dubai. I said, why don't you come? Afterwards, we sat down with her. She's ready to take her shahada 100%. What was holding her back? You'll never believe it. Something to do with polygamy. But not polygamy itself. Because she read a lot about Islam. She might have read too much, was the problem, Because she said, no, polygamy at first I was against it, but now I understand why it is in Islam, and I agree with it. I have no problem with that. Allah Akbar. So what's holding you back? She said, there's one issue, and that is the husband doesn't have to take permission from his wife if he were to get married again. So Allah Akbar. I said, this was holding you back? And I talked to her and I gave her all the good excuses you give. She said, I just can't understand why some of the scholars say. I said, not all the scholars say that. As I said, some scholars, especially because the problems that we see, we always say, you really should tell your wife it's better. Say, yeah, but it's better, but it's not logical. Now you don't have to do it. And I said, oh no. She wasn't convinced. We tried, because she believed, she loved Islam. But this is one issue. Shaitan was holding her back on this issue. I said, this is like a fifth issue. It's not even. I said, what are you talking about? It's no, And she was ready, but she wouldn't take the shahada. She came back, was it about 2 weeks later? And she called me, she said, I'm ready to take my shahada. I said, come tonight, I have another lesson there. She came, and there was a sister from the Philippines who brought another one. She wanted to accept Islam as well. And she said, I'm ready now. She said, I listened to what you said, and I understood, and I want to take my shahada. She took her shahada. She broke down into tears. The sister who was in charge of the center, she broke down into tears. My wife was there, she broke down into tears. The Filipino sister who had come, she broke down into tears. The one who was coming to think about entering Islam, she broke down into tears. And she took her shahada too. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, I didn't break down into tears. But I was very emotional about this. So this is something now that it might not be that time, but you have to try to convince them that it is the time. And then especially you never know when you're going to go. I remember when I first accepted Islam in America, I was with one of my good friends before Islam. And we were driving down the road and I was talking about Islam and talking about this. And he said, I'm convinced. I want to become Muslim, but give me a year and then I'll do it. And I said, what's holding you back here? What's your problem? He said, it's the women. And he said, and in Islam you can't fornicate. So he said, this is my issue. I said, alhamdulillah, I said, Islam, no problem. We have 4 wives. He said, 4 is not enough. He said, I'm doing good for myself. I'm on a roll. So I want something new every day, if I can. He said, I'm on a mission. He said, in a year I'll probably have enough, so then I'll become Muslim. Then I started talking about death. You never know when you're going to go. You put it off, you might die. And he has one of the cars called the lowrider. The pickup truck is really low to the ground. And we're driving down the road, and it was raining, and this big tractor-trailer truck comes out, the semi comes out in the middle of the road and stops. And he slams on the brake and he slid because it was raining. And the car literally stopped the glass where we were sitting down, it was very low, under the truck, like this. It's about to go through our heads. But we stopped like that right before the glass. I looked at him and said, you see what I'm saying about death? He said, shut up, Cross. Talk to me in a year. I told you, don't talk to me anymore. Something you try your best, but at the end, so sometimes, people are not going to listen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, مَعَلَى رَسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. The messengers listen, the messengers. It's only upon them to relay the message. You relay a message and you try to convince the people, But if they don't listen, they don't follow, alhamdulillah, it's not, you've done your job. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for your fruitful and very nice explanation. My question will be a bit with the explanation. Because sometimes it happens, we do something bad with the waswasa of shaitan, and as you have told that after doing bad, do something good to wash it away. So later on, as you have told, we are burning inside, we are not getting peace. Why did I do that? So I try to solve it, but something hold back. Like, let me give some example. Maybe I have quarreled with my maybe neighbor, friend, or brother, sister, or even parents. Later on, I'm burning inside that I'm not getting peace in my ibadah, or I'm doing my daily job, but not getting the peace. I should solve it. But I know, on the other contrary, that if I go to solve it, they might insult me and the things might get worsened. So I'm not solving with the fear of that. So as you have told that we should see the level of our taqwa and akhlaq and try to improve upon it.
Yes.
So if you kindly give some example, some specific example that on what type of weakness, what all are the practice we may follow, which will improve our taqwa and akhlaq. Specific on which weaknesses, what type of practice we may follow.
It's a very detailed question that I was asking about and how to implement. It's more about implementation, but how to improve our taqwa and our akhlaq. That's basically, in a nutshell, what he was saying. And one of the best ways to do that is through following the sunnah of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, reading his seerah and trying to imitate him. When we see how the Prophet ﷺ was, and how he treated the people, how he dealt with people, that's going to help us do the same thing, inshallah. And there's so much benefit in barakah in reading and focusing on the seerah of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. You can't enumerate what you're going to benefit when you focus on it. You follow his footsteps. How many people, look when he went into Mecca, and the people who had harmed him, the same people who wanted to kill him, the people who tortured his companions and killed his companions, and here he comes in and he has the opportunity to get revenge on all of them. What did he say? Antum al-tulaqa. You're the free ones. He freed them. SubhanAllah. This had the effect on them, and then people in Mecca became Muslim because of this. That's just one example. All the time the Prophet would forgive. And he would forgive the people who had done wrong to him. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said the Prophet never became angry unless what? Or never sought revenge for himself. He never became angry unless something haram was done. Then he became angry for Allah. He never sought revenge for himself. He never became angry unless something haram was done. So he became angry for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for himself. When we strive to follow the footsteps of the Prophet and to imitate the Prophet, so we strive to follow that, then that's the key thing. But also when we can add to that our ibadat, our acts of worship, through reading the Quran, through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the salat, all of these things that are purifying the heart. When the heart becomes pure, it becomes easy to deal with other people. I'll tell you an example about something that happened, a beautiful story with Imam Abu Hanifa, Raheem, who was walking down the road and somebody was insulting him and cursing at him. And imagine if somebody wanted to insult you and curse at you, what would you do? You would probably return the favor, right? If somebody gave you a finger, one of the fingers, on the road now you're driving, what would you do? Would you give him a wave or would you give him the same finger back? Let's be honest. Somebody said something to you, you would say it back, or even worse sometimes. If you have the ability, you get out of the car and you handle business. Let them stop the car. It's handled like men, huh? It's not how men handle it. This man is cursing at him, and he's not saying anything to him the whole time. He's walking in the room. He said, "Do this, you're that, you're this, you're this." When he got to his house, he turned to the man and he said to him, "Is there anything else you would like to say?" The man was in shock. He said, "I've been cursing at you and insulting you, putting you down, belittling you the whole time. And now you ask me if there's anything else I can say?" Because here, it's someone who's a faqih, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He said, "Of course." He said, "Because the whole time," he said, "you've been taking away from my bad deeds and giving me your good deeds. I'm winning. I'm benefiting. I need all the khair I can get from there. So you're helping me out." So the man, after that, he fell in love with Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and became somebody who took from him, benefit from him. So this is how the Muslim needs to be. It's not easy. And the nafs, subhanAllah. But sometimes when it comes to the example that you gave, like dealing with a neighbor or dealing with a colleague, that might make it worse if you go and apologize to them. That what you need to do sometimes is give it time. Or even myself, sometimes I differ with some of my brothers. Some of the du'at, we have differences. And sometimes people have said very harsh things to me. And I tell them, well, my door's open for you, my heart's open for you. If you change your mind, I'm your brother, call me anytime. I'm not going to hold anything. If you're against me, I'm not going to be against you. So this is the thing we need to, and it's called tarbiyah. You have to train yourself. It's not just that you're going to come in the masjid and you can do it all. You have to train yourself. It takes time. But you have to practice, and then you have to always try to be bigger and better than that. The Prophet mentioned when the two, they have a quarrel, they have a dispute. He said, خَيْرُهُمْ, the best of them, is who? مَنْ يَبْدَأ بِالسَّلَامِ, one who gives the salam. For a few days you have to give salam. You can only do 3 days by the way, Islam. After the best of the two is the one who starts with the salam. Train yourself. Shaitan, you had a fight with your brother or your neighbor. You saw in the masjid and you looked the other way. 2 days and you say, Assalamu alaikum. He doesn't give you salam, you've done your role. And then you're going to relax inside because you've done what the Prophet told you to do. When you train yourself, look at the man who, the Prophet said, you're going to see a man who comes from the people of Jannah who's going to enter into the door right now. Somebody came in, nobody really knew who he was. He was a regular guy. It wasn't like Abu Bakr or Umar or the famous Sahaba. So Abdullah ibn Amr, radiallahu anhuma, he said he wanted to come and see who was this man. He went to his house and looked at his ibadah, didn't find he was doing anything special and out of the ordinary that anybody else was doing. So he told him, he said, I heard the Prophet said this about you. What are you doing? What are you doing that's so special, so unique? He said, there's only one thing that I do that I think is unique, that I do all the time. He said, I don't let myself go to bed at night and have anything in my heart against another Muslim. Allah. He said, I don't let myself sleep at night and I have something in my heart against another Muslim. It's not easy. If you think now, how many people you know you have something in your heart against them? It's difficult. But you try. If you have 10 people who have something, make it 7, make it 8. Try it. And you gradually, and you make it better, inshallah. That's how you train yourself in Allah's best.
Okay. Last question, inshallah, because he's got another program.
Is there any such thing as too much fear of Allah that stops you from doing what is your responsibility in the dunya?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is there anything that's too much fear of Allah which stops you from doing your responsibility in the dunya? The Muslim is ordered to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with 3 components. There has to be 3 things. If any of these 3 are not there, or they're not equal, one is more than the other, then there's going to be khalal, there's going to be mistakes in your ibadah, and how you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing is the hub, the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you love someone or something in this dunya, anything, you see the effects that love has. You see the effects it has on you when you love something. So when you truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing for Allah, leaving for Allah becomes easy. But when you do, and you leave for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's still 2 components left that have to be met. You have the love. After you have the love, you have to have the fear and the hope. They have to be balanced. That's why the scholars of Islam, when they give a description of these 3, they say it's like the bird. The love is like the body. And the fear and hope are like the 2 wings. If there's anything wrong with one of the wings, what happens to the bird? It falls. Something happens to the body, it dies. So it can't live. If it can't fly, it can't live. So there has to be a balance between the fear and between the hope. If you have too much hope, you fall into too much sin. If you have too much fear, you could do things which are un-Islamic. It could happen. It is possible. You put too much fear, you fall into things sometimes that could be un-Islamic and not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even sometimes people have, when they come to the fear, that Allah won't accept this, Allah won't accept that. It's not true. And then the shaitan starts to whisper them. And you're having too much fear or not having the balance, we should say, not too much fear, not having the balance. Because you have the fear, and then you have the hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have the love by doing and leaving hope for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows best. Allah alam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammad. So we have some other sittings coming up.
Brother has raised his hand. You give him an exception.
Okay, bismillah.
Okay, bismillah.
Tiny question. For the likes of Umar ibn Khattab, the person, to black line for how much he used to cry for
Yeah.
Allah. That's an example like that. Does that pretty much say that our level of fear of Allah is nothing, or should it be more? Should we
And it shows that our levels is, the question he's asking about Umar al-Khattab and others who had the black lines or marks on their faces from crying too much. And he says, does this show that our level of taqwa is very weak? Obviously it does, because if we were to be honest and ask ourselves, when is the last time we cried out of fear for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When's the last time we cried out of hope? When we heard the ayat of Jannah, and we broke down the tears, Allah make us from fear of Jannah. We heard the ayat of the hellfire, and it put the fear in our hearts. We heard the ayat of the munafiqeen, what's going to happen to them? You say, no, I'm not munafiq, I made it. You know? The Sahaba used to think, maybe I am, maybe I have some nifaq somewhere. Maybe my iman is not kamil. It's not complete. But this is the thing, we need to strive to get that balance. And when you strive, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be there with you. He said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That those who strive for us, verily we will guide them to our ways, and verily Allah will be able to do us of good. So even if we don't reach, this was a question, subhanAllah, that I had yesterday. We had a sitting with some of the sisters from Kenya, Somalia, and Nigeria. From the students in Sudan, I was with them, I had a sitting with them yesterday before I came here to Kuwait. And subhanAllah, they asked the question about, we'll never reach where the Sahaba reached, so what do we do? What does this mean? So even if we can't reach what they reached, maybe there will be some people who will reach a high level. Because even in the late days, we have some people who have their iman, mashallah, tabarak. And their amal, their actions, you see it, mashallah, tabarak. You'll see it even in the time we live in. Even if we don't reach the Sahaba. Something beautiful I heard from one of our brothers one time, he said that what if we reached 25% of what they reached? Let's make a commitment to try to be like them. Make that commitment to try to be like them. And if we reach 25% of what they reached, is that khair and barakah? Is it good and blessing or not? It's beautiful, no doubt. So what's important is that you try, you continue to strive, and you always constantly try to improve yourself. You constantly, every day, try to become better, try to improve yourself at all times. And alhamdulillah, maybe you'll reach some what they reached. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us, inshallah, and benefit us from what was said. And if there was anything that was beneficial, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes, it's from the shaitan. Allah is best. Allah alam. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.